Yes, let me welcome the one and only yogi extraordinaire, Yirser Hotep is here. Welcome, Yirser.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to be here, and I'm excited. That's all I can say.
Well, I'm going, since she called an audible, I'm gonna pass the ball. I'm gonna do an end around and just give her the ball because before you came in, for many Black folk raised in the Christian tradition, we were raised to believe that yoga will in all kinds of chanting and in all kinds of spiritual ways that did not line up with exactly the way it is in that book was of the devil. Did you come up in that same tradition, sir?
I didn't come up in that tradition, but I have experienced that type of resistance from a lot of people around me over the years and from various institutions where I've tried to introduce yoga into, because they have a misunderstanding of what yoga really is. They think of it as a religion. They think of it as Hinduism and things like that. They don't understand that real yoga is a system of self-development. And so they're missing out on it. And but I've been able to break through some of those barriers because I've tried to explain yoga from a health and wellness perspective. And I talk about how it helps you to manage stress, how it lowers blood pressure, how it helps with diabetes, and how it helps people who even have other types of disorders like erectile dysfunction, things like that. So that helps me to break through those types of resistances that we see in people.
Well, as I'm going on yoga skills, and if y'all in Chicago, you got to stop by yogaskills.com. As a Black man, were you raised in Chicago? Did you grow up in Chicago?
I was born and raised in Chicago. I was born 4 blocks down the street from where I'm sitting at right now in Bronzeville. And that's where I'm at. I'm a Bronzeville person. Bronzeville is the Black area of Chicago, the first original Black neighborhood of Chicago. It's the only place where Black people were able to settle into when they came here, during the Great Migration.
So how does a young man from that part of Chicago even get introduced to yoga? I mean, you grew up in an era where there were really lovely street gangs. I'm going to say it because of my Chicago history serves me. Block to block, there was these communities was cropping up in Chicago. There was, I think, Daly. Y'all had some complicated people leading y'all, Bronzeville, and so who introduced you to yoga?
Well, the first thing before I even got to yoga, when I was around 21, I decided I was just going to become a vegetarian. I was going to start eating healthy. I think I was influenced to some degree by Dick Gregory and stuff like that. But on my 21st birthday, I just decided I was going to change my lifestyle and eat and become healthy. And I started to learn about meditation and things like that from reading books and things, and then about a year later, I was in college at UIC where I was working on my bachelor's degree in political science. And I met a young lady, and she said she wanted to take me to her yoga class. And I didn't have any interest in yoga. I thought yoga was some kind of weird stuff,
But so, you had an interest in a young lady. You were like, I'll come.
Well, that wasn't even the case. But eventually it became the case. So I got interested in her, and I got interested in the yoga. I only got interested in yoga because I went to the class. And when I first went there, I was expecting to see like a little Indian man in a little diaper and stuff. And it was a 6'5" brother who was very smooth and stuff. And he could do anything with his body in terms of yoga movements and postures. I was very stiff. But I decided that I wanted to practice yoga because the example that he showed me, his name was Dr. Azar P. And also because when I practiced, when I did the meditation, when I did the relaxation, I felt so good. And I said, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life because it's going to help me to maintain my youthfulness. It's going to help me to have longevity. It's going to help me to be productive. And so I spent like 8 to 12 hours every day practicing.
Wow. So how long ago was that, Yirser?
That was close to 50 years ago.
Right. And the idea that you were this young man who was, maybe you're playing basketball, maybe you're doing that kind of thing. How tall are you, Yirser?
I'm only 6'2".
And the idea that, you're this brother, you're playing basketball, you're doing this thing, and there's this expectation, you're in Brownsville. As Professor Hunter said, there's a lot going on. Also, marijuana, junk food, this and that, just the lethargy of it all. And the idea that you just turned this corner and went into this is fascinating. I love that you were talking about, your bachelor's in political science and your master's degree in social work at the University of Chicago. And I really adore the way that you bring yoga practice into the community, like into the hood, into prisons, into schools, kindergarten, colleges. I mean, this is everything because you're paying it forward and looking back to everybody that's there in your area. I want you to speak a little bit more about that, Yirser, like the way you've been able to influence your community around you in the last 50 years.
Well, the word came to my mind that I'm like a yoga evangelist, right? So I'm trying to spread yoga, and I'm trying to spread yoga from an African perspective because I do Kemetic yoga, and myself and my teacher, we were pioneers in developing this idea that the ancient people of Kemet practice yoga, and we've done our own primary research. We learned how to read the Madhu Nature or the hieroglyphs, and we've been able to demonstrate that through documentation that these people were practicing yoga, that they had a yogic philosophy that sort of guided their life. And so with doing that, we look upon yoga as being one of the tools that we use for our liberation, right? Because when we talk about liberation, we talk about political rights, we talk about civil rights and things like that. But, we have to put an emphasis on wellness. We have to put an emphasis on overcoming trauma, overcoming stress, how to manage stress, and how to really transcend our consciousness and move our consciousness out of this sort of westernized matrix way of thinking that's been imposed upon us by the system of racism, white supremacy that we inherited through colonization and through enslavement. So yoga for us, for Kemetic yoga, it is, it's part of our liberation practice, and so that's the way we approach it. And so even during the pandemic, during the not Rodney King, but George Floyd protests, and that, people were traumatized. People were traumatized during the pandemic through the seeing George Floyd being murdered and seeing other people being murdered on the streets. So we did, online workshops and classes geared towards overcoming trauma, overcoming racial trauma, and so our program is based upon that. And so we work with people from all ages. We work, we've had programs since the 80s, working with young children, but really since the 70s. We're working with young kids in after-school programs, working with kids in Head Start programs, working with kids in grade school, in high school, in colleges, working with people in prison, in group homes, things like that, juvenile detention centers. So we've done all of this type of work, and I've sort of been able to meld my work as a social worker with my work as a holistic health, practitioner, and also as a yoga practitioner. So we work with people with mental illness, people with substance abuse issues, and the whole gamut. So
I love that, Yirser, because
I've been sort of meshed that together.
I love it because when we're talking about yoga, Professor Hunter, sometimes we're thinking about people in the Lululemon pants and the little mat on their back and but going to Yirser's classes, I've been to Kemet with Yirser, I've been to Egypt.
Okay, let's sit with that. Because again, when I think yoga, I think not anymore because I'm now fully decolonized, but it's downward facing dog. It is, to Yirser's point, a little tiny man in a diaper, I did Bikram for a while for the sweating. I love to sweat. Sweating is so powerful to me, and some things transform in those poses. But I know that Bikram guy was a little problematic. But when you take it back to Kemet, and we look at the hieroglyphs and we look at the Medu Neter and we see all of the symbols, for you, like, where does it start? And for you going to Kemet, doing yoga, you did yoga with him, Dr. Ahmed?
Absolutely.
Walk us through, what is it for those of us, some people will be traveling with Dr. Carr and Dr. Mario Beatty to Egypt. It is not a Nubian trip. It is a trip that they are sponsoring, that a lot of Nubians are going on. When you went with our yogi, what was the first thing you experienced? Can you walk us through it for those of us who may never go to Kemet and do yoga in Egypt?
Right. Well, I had trained with Yirser before we went there, and we've been all over the world on retreat, from Brazil to Jamaica to Dominica to other places, to all over the United States, sort of on tour. Right. We're on a world tour with my man. Right. And so we would be on tour bringing wellness to different cities and places. And so going to Kemet that first time with Yirser, the idea of making the connections, right, between the Sesh Metunater, the writings, what people call hieroglyphs, and the fact that these were actually physical poses. They were instructions on wellness. It wasn't just somebody sitting this way, the hands are going backward, someone's in what we would call child pose, right? Sometimes or whatever. Like, these all had names in Metunater, in ancient Egyptian language, and they were prescriptions for physical movement. Yirser drew a total line for me between those things. And I was like, whoa, it was mind blowing. So it was amazing to do yoga at the pyramids, in Abu Simbel, at the temples there, like just everywhere we went. It was enlightening and energetic. Like, you could feel that our ancestors had done that already in those spaces. It was great.
And what's the goal? Yirser, Ra Hotep is here. Yogaskills.com. It's in Chicago. You can go there and check it out. What would have been the goal 2,000 years ago to even be in community? So, because I guess you could do it alone, but it seems like when you look at what they call hieroglyphs, you see people, right? So being in community, is that important, to be together doing it?
It's important to a degree, but for me, yoga is a solitary type of practice. I practice yoga, with my students, when I'm traveling, we're doing workshops. And so people do like to do yoga in groups. We do come together, that's like right now we are doing something online. We're doing a challenge called Ma'at Ka, 42 days of Ma'at Ka. And so it's like a challenge. So we got people all over the world doing this one particular sequence of movements and poses, every day for 42 days in a row.
Where do we find? Wait, hold on. Where do we find the series of poses?
I posted a video on my website. I'm not on my website, on my YouTube channel.
And then you also have an ebook that's free for people, Yirser. I think, it's good to let folks know that, because they can go through those. So Professor Hunter, when you were saying that you've been to Bikram yoga and they have a series of poses, same thing. Our ancestors had these series of poses. And one of the things I learned from Yirser was that it was in Africa, of course, that things originate. And the ancient Egyptians went on walkabout. Right, go and walk about, and they were going as Dravidians. These are the initial people who populated and brought those sciences, arts, medicine to India. So we see that traveled over, and sometimes people just automatically think yoga, India, but that's not really the case. When you the deeper you dig, the darker it gets, right? So this is where we go with it. I also saw for myself, and Yirser is like, you're 70 now, Yirser?
In October, I will.
He's like, don't push it. But Yirser does handstands, headstands, total splits. I mean, you name it. And I just think to myself, to be 70 and in that condition, and I think I've sent you some photos, but if people go to the website, to yogaskills.com, they're going to see that his level of movement and the ability to return that level of flexibility to lots of folks who haven't experienced that since childhood. That's one of the things I really regard highly.
So two things. The goal of these movements, when we do them every day for 42 days, Ma'at Kar, what is the goal? What is to happen with our bodies, with our spirits?
The goal is to enhance your health. We started 42 days of Ma'at Kar on March 1st because we're trying to transition into the spring season. And as you transition, you want to, eat better. You want to cleanse. You want to maybe fast. You want to maybe go into a cleanse where you clean out your colon, clean out your liver and things like that.
Y'all dirty inside. We dirty.
And go to Calabash tea and get you some and herbs.
Detox. Yes, all of that.
And so we have documented scientifically that when you do these particular postures that you see on the walls of the temples of Kemet, that they have certain physiological effects upon your body. They lower your blood pressure. They stimulate your digestive system. They stimulate your eliminative system. They allow you to clear your head and to think better. They move energy through your body. They increase your blood circulation. They have a wide variety of specific effects. And also from a meditative perspective, when we meditate, we actually become more in tune with our own ancestors, right? Because one of the goals of Kemetic yoga is, I want to connect. When my grandmother was alive, she took care of me. When I needed some shoes, some pants, she took care of those things. We are Africans. From an African perspective, we believe that our ancestors still exist on a spiritual level and that we can communicate with them and that they can affect us on an energetic level from the spirit world and affect our material condition where we are. And so we try to connect with that idea in our practice of yoga too. So it is both physiological, physical, wellness based, and it's also spiritual from an African level of spirituality.
So the full splits that you still do, going on 70, I just I think that's important.
You have to see it. You have to see the headstands, the handstands. There's a pose called the scorpion where he's like down on his elbows and the feet are up in the air and then they fold behind him. I'm like, I don't even know. This brother's amazing. And one of the things, just to let you know, Professor Hunter, part of what I've learned from Yirser over the years, I've known Yirser more than 20 years, is I had trouble meditating. My mind would just be racing. I know that's hard to believe, but my mind would be racing and moving and overthinking. And that might also cause me trouble resting at night, like sleeping. And Yirser was the one who taught me how to meditate. And I grew up in communities where people were meditating. I just couldn't still my mind. But I took his meditation class and it was miraculous. Like I was able to calm my mind and get into this other space. So I just think, when we have these learned folks in our community, we should tap on their shoulder. And that's why I wanted to introduce you and all of the folks here listening and the Nubians, because Yirser will be joining me this Sunday. He came on last Sunday and there were so many questions. We could not get through them all. People were just falling in love with Yirser, as we all do. And so this Sunday, folks need to pop into Nubia and go ahead and get those questions ready and find out how to alleviate some of these issues that we have. Like he said, erectile dysfunction, we've got, cramps and PMS, we've got menopausal issues, we've got joints.
Fibroids.
fibroids, flexibility.
Wait, pause. How do you eradicate fibroids through yoga? How is that possible?
Well, for one thing, we deal with the stress issue, we deal with the diet issue, and we also deal with the stimulation of that area of your body through your movements and your postures. Those movements and postures are supposed to massage your internal organs. They're supposed to increase your blood circulation. That's, the movements and postures, the practices that we do increase your body's ability to have immunity and to fight off, to identify invaders and then to deal with those things. So we have we have seen scientifically, we've done research to show that these practices reduce things like fibroids, erectile dysfunction, prostate issues, high blood pressure, so on and so forth, right? And one thing I'm going to point out is that even though Dr. Sunyata talks about me doing all these fantastic movements, the movements of Kemetic yoga are very precise and very easy to do. Okay.
They are. They're accessible. They're accessible. I just like to show out on Yirser and just be like, he's amazing, but they're very accessible. They're reproducible. That same way that Bikram yoga is, and maybe even in a more accessible way. You're doing it at home. You don't have to pay a bunch of money. And then you're learning the Kemetic language. You're learning a lot about your history as you're going through. I mean, Yirser, I made a note, like you've taken more than 34 retreats to Kemet, taking people there. Wow. And all over the world. And folks are enriched. And we've seen people on retreats, he and I together, where people are having trouble getting pregnant or they're having other kinds of issues. And then a year later, we see them. They're like, look at my new baby. We're like, oh, hey.
Popping out the babies.
Oh, I love it.